This is Eileen Doherty. I'm with the Colorado Gerontological Society, and thank you all for signing up today. Hopefully this will prove to be a helpful discussion for everyone as we go through the afternoon. So this is a series called Aging in Place, and what we're going to talk about today is bringing non-skilled services into the home. So the topics that we want to talk about today are knowing which services are needed, knowing how and where to find them, how to pay for them, and how to trust the services that you receive. So the first thing that we want to talk a little bit about is activities of daily living versus instrumental activities of daily living. And this sounds pretty academic for those of you who have not worked in the field of hands-on care, such as social work, nursing homes, home care agencies, places like that. So basically what they consider an activity of daily living is something like self-care, walking, bathing, dressing, toileting, brushing your teeth, eating, those kinds of things. Can you take care of your basic needs? Instrumental activities of daily living then are the more complex tasks. These are the things that oftentimes require additional executive decision-making, judgment, more activity or intervention on your part. So these are things like laundry, washing dishes, shopping for groceries, preparing meals, taking your medications, working on computers, yard work, that kind of stuff. So one of the things that the Colorado Gerontological Society has done over the last 5 to 10 years is we have developed a lot of tools that we are going to talk a little bit about today, as well as tools that other people have also developed. So in the chart that you see at the moment, we have developed something called Help Me Find Services for Older Adults and Families. This is a screening tool where you answer a number of questions, and at the end, it will tell you whether or not you should explore this type of home care services or whether you should explore another type of housing services. And it gives you the opportunity to do one or the other. We also have developed a couple of checklists. One of them is what to look for when choosing a home health agency. Another is what to look for when choosing a hospice. Another is choosing a caregiver. In addition to that, we also have our housing and home care locator. This is an interactive search of data of licensed facilities on our website. It's a database of all of those facilities for housing, home care that are licensed in the state. And then lastly, many of you may be familiar with our senior resource guidebook. We have not printed that since 2019 due to the pandemic, but our plan is to reprint that in 2022. Another way that you can find services is you can use the newspaper, word of mouth, various kinds of directories. Lots of people do advertising, both in senior papers as well as some in the dailies or the weekly newspapers, senior fairs. There are placement referral agencies, care management agencies, and a lot of community-based agencies. Another way that a lot of people get information about services is through like the Nextdoor app that's on your computer or on which is an application for neighborhoods, or some people use the website. So this particular tool, if you will, or screening questionnaire is called Help Me Find Services for Older Adults. And
help me find services for older adults. And
what you want to do is after you have completed some of the basic information, then as I said, it will tell you what kind of services you need. And then you can search the database. So what I want to do is spend a little bit of time just showing you how this works. So this is our current website. It will be updated shortly, but this is the screening tool itself. And so it asks some basic information about, are you screening or looking for services for yourself or for someone else? And as I go through this kind of quickly, I'm going to basically take a lady that I recently placed. She was a low-income person. She was needing to leave her independent living facility. So this just gives me a little bit of information about her. She lived in Denver County, and she speaks English. And then it asks a little bit of information about you, the person using this. And this just gives us some basic data that we can go back to our funding agencies to be able to say who is helping this, or who is using this tool. So the first thing that we basically want to do is we look at different kinds of payment types. So are we receiving Medicare and Medicaid? Do you get veterans benefits? Do you have long-term care insurance? Are you able to pay for any of these services? The next thing it looks at is, where do you currently live? This particular lady lived in low-income housing. The next set of questions then are, what kind of help does she need? So the first question is, can she walk within her house? And she doesn't need any help with that. She's somewhat at risk of falling.
Recording in progress.
And whoever joined, turn off their telephone. And I'm sorry, I was working in my screen. Can you see my screen and the screening questionnaire?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So, all right. So can you see all the questions that I have been going through?
No.
No. Okay, that's what I was afraid of here.
The only thing we can see is information about, and then it's age, gender, annual income.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see the screening questionnaire now?
Yes.
Okay, and you see more information?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to go back and start over just so you can see how this looks. So, so are you finding services for someone else? This particular lady was 88. She's low income. Her zip code was 80211. She lived in Denver County. She speaks English. This section gives us a little bit of information about who the users are and where you live, just so that we can give information to our funding sources. This next section then looks at payment types. Are you receiving Medicare? Yes, she gets Medicaid. She's not eligible for veterans benefits. She's not eligible for long-term care insurance, and she's not able to pay anything. Currently, she lives in low-income housing. The next set of questions then starts to drill down and try to figure out what kinds of services that she might need. So she is able to walk within her own home. She has some risk probably of falling. Could she benefit from regular check-ins? Yes. Does she need any transportation? She doesn't have any cars, so she's totally dependent there. She is able to cook some, but she probably could use some help. She's able to give herself a bath. She's not incontinent. She doesn't need any help toileting. She probably needs a little bit of help paying her bills. She can use some help in terms of housekeeping. She's able to dress herself. She's probably doing okay on taking her meds, although I'm a little worried about that. And can she take her meds herself? Yes. Then the next set of questions, really, again, back on this activities of daily living that we talked about a few minutes ago. What this section then really looks at is what kind of assistance she might need. So she spent any time in the hospital recently? No. Has she been told that she has 6 months to live or less? No, that's the question actually that drives you to looking toward hospice services if you're using it. And has she had any occupational or physical therapy or anything? And she has not. So then the next set of questions basically is trying to determine how much help is needed. So does she need any help with insulin or injections? She doesn't take any, so she doesn't need that. She is not on any kind of chemotherapy, so she doesn't need that. She does have a lot of pain from an old back injury and some other stuff. So she does need some pain management kind of support. She's not on IV therapies, and she doesn't have any open wounds. The next one then really helps us to try to look at memory and cognition. And does she have any short-term memory loss? I don't really suspect that she does. Does she forget things that happened a long time ago? Does she have dementia? Is she, what is she forgetting? Is she confused? Is she a wandering risk? So I'm not concerned about any of those things for her either. Behavioral concerns, does she have any mental health issues? No. Does she have any anxiety? Yes, she has some anxiety and depression. Is she motivated and lack motivation and apathy? A little bit. Does she have any delusions? No. Is she prone to anger? No. Is she at risk for harming herself or others? Does she have a plan for self-harm? No. Does she a substance abuser? No. And has she been released from jail recently? The last one then, or the next one then, is the priority for, does she want to live in her own home, or are we going to move her out of her home? So is it a high priority to keep her in her own home? No. In this instance, we're going to move her. Does she have family support? No, because her son lives in the Philippines and her daughter lives in Australia. Are we paying a family caregiver? No. Does the individual require overnight care? No, she doesn't really need that. Does she require some kind of supervision and oversight if the family's not available? That's probably a good idea. So then this last is just if you had any other questions. And so then what happens is we submit. And It's going to tell us that here's where you recommend the services. So it says that we could use a Class B home care agency. We might want to consider adult day. We might want to consider nursing facilities, and we might want to consider an assisted living. So that's kind of how this particular tool works, if you will. So since we are specifically now concerned about home care, we're going to do a search, if you will, on services that match your needs and criteria, and we can use this filter. So we're looking here in this first one. If we know the name of the service we want, we can simply search it. If we don't know the name, then we can put help in the home, and we want home care, and we can search over here by city or by zip code. So we'll search from 802 to 211, which is where she lives, and we'll search in a 5-mile radius. And what we see is that there are 16 agencies that accept Medicare, or that are in her zip code. And so then we can do that. We can run the search. And oh, that was searching on 80203. So if we search in, whoops. Okay, so now we're searching 80211, we're searching 5-mile radius, we're searching for home care, and we're searching for help in the home. So then we see that there are 35 agencies within this area. So then we can refine our search for payment type. So this particular lady, we know she has Medicaid. We know she might be eligible for some kind of home care. We don't really know what. So maybe we'll try that one as well. So now we're going to conduct our search, and now we've got 29 results. And now we can start to zero in on the different home care agencies that might be available. So we get the name of the agency, we can call them. We can know that they accept Medicare and Medicaid and private pay. We know over here that they do skilled services and non-skilled services, that they're a registry, that they're a companion. So if we look at this particular agency, I think that this one is not going to be a Class B agency. I think it's going to be a Class A agency because they do skilled services, but non-skilled services. So we would have to search again to find an agency that had non-skilled services. So that's just kind of a general overview of how this particular tool, if you will, works, and hopefully is something that will be of assistance and benefit to you. So that is one tool that we have. The next tool that I want to talk a little bit about is, can you see this now that says choosing a caregiver?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So on this particular tool then, once you have kind of selected, if you will, or figured out what kind of care you might need to be able to stay in your own home or apartment, then the next thing really is to try to figure out who that person should be or who you should hire. So once you got the names of the particular agencies, what kinds of other things would you want to consider? So here's some questions that we have used and tested over the years. Do you feel comfortable with the person when you first visited? Did they answer your questions? Do they have experience doing the things you need? Are they bonded? And if not, can you do that? What kind of duties do you require? And do they have any expertise in doing that? So if you need personal care, are they licensed or registered? And do they have these appropriate licenses if they need them? So for example, a CNA, if you were hiring a CNA, certified nursing assistant, they are licensed by the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, and you can go in and check that. Some people that you would hire are not required to be licensed. Some of them might only be certified or take certain kinds of training. Those people are you're less able, if you will, to check them and check their credentials, if you will. For some of you, you may have a long-term care insurance policy, and if you do, will the long-term care insurance policy pay? And then another question that you want to ask is if the person is going to be doing any kind of errands for you, or if they are going to be taking you any place. What is their motor vehicle department or motor vehicle record, and is their driver's license current? And you think, well, maybe that sounds straight, or that should be straightforward, but it's not necessarily. Another checklist that we have developed over time is how to actually choose a home health agency. And home health agencies tend to specialize, if you will, in certain areas of care. So some of them, oftentimes they will say, I am providing non-skilled care, or we provide skilled care only, or we take care of veterans, or we provide wound care, or we only take home and community-based services clients. So a lot of the facilities do specialize. So some screening kinds of questions that you can use when you're doing some comparison shopping is, again, how long has the agency been in business? It's important to look and see if they're licensed or registered in the state of Colorado. You can ask them for this, or if you're computer savvy, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and you can check out and see whether or not they're licensed or whether they're registered. Another question to ask the home care agencies is, what are the qualifications of their staff? Who do they bring in? What kind of training do they provide them? Is it an initial training? Do they provide ongoing training? Another question is, what does the staff supervision look like? If they're a Medicaid or a home and community-based services agency, that supervision is mandated by regulation. If they are a non-skilled private pay agency, their staff supervision is going to be whatever their agency policies are. Another question to ask is, who's my caregiver? Who is the person who's going to come and take care of me, and how does that match happen? Another thing you want to look at is the agreement. Most of us sign these agreements just because they put a piece of paper in front of us. But it might be a good idea to at least glance over this contract, because it is a legally binding contract, and to make sure that you understand what you are purchasing, what you are buying, and how you can get out of the contract, or how the agency can get out of it. Another thing to look at is if you're buying either skilled services or non-skilled services, what those services are, and then do like a comparison of those as well. And the last checklist that we have put together over the years for comparison shopping is in the area of hospices. How do you choose a hospice? Hospice is care that is provided to terminally ill individuals and support to caregivers and families. You do have to have a physician's order, and hospice does not cure illness, but rather they focus on pain management and symptom relief from the terminal illness, and they provide supportive care during the dying process and help basically with bereavement and other services after death. So in Colorado, another thing to look at is whether or not this facility, how long they've been in business, the hospice, and whether or not they are licensed. And most hospices are also certified by Medicare. You can get that information at medicare.gov. If you happen to use the list of hospices on our website, we only list the ones that are certified by Medicare. Another thing that's important sometimes for hospice is depending on what kind of health insurance you have. If you have, for example, a Medicare Advantage plan, the hospice may or may not be contracted with that Medicare Advantage. So the one you want to use may or may not be part of your insurance, and that sometimes is important as well. Are there any charges for hospice services? And according to the Medicare rules, hospice can charge 5% for prescription drugs, and they can also charge 5% if they provide respite care. Medicare does not, under hospice, pay for any room and board. So again, if that is a concern, you will either need to see if you qualify for Medicaid to pay that. If you're in your own home, obviously you would just pay for it as you would normally pay your bills. Another question to ask is, what is the role of your current physician? Hospices have their own physicians, so usually your care under hospice is transferred to the hospice physician. Your private primary care physician may continue to be involved for non-home care or non-hospice services, or all of your care may be the responsibility of the hospice physician. And then another question to ask is, what are the qualifications of the people who are going to be working with you? So the nurses, the aides, the social worker, what are their licenses and those kinds of things? How are the volunteers that might come to your home? How are they trained? And then what is the staff supervision? Again, under Medicare, there are pretty specific guidelines in terms of how staff will be supervised. Another service that sometimes is available for families who want to keep older adults in their own home is adult day programs. Adult day programs basically function somewhat similar to child care programs. They target frail older adults who need some type of oversight and supervision. Usually they provide meals, activities, they can administer medications. They're usually kind of a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 7 to 6 kind of operation. Different ones have different hours. Most of them that are available in Colorado do accept Medicaid, and there are a few that accept private pay only. The important thing to know is that an adult day program that accepts Medicaid is licensed by Healthcare Policy and Financing and surveyed by the Colorado Department of Public Health. If you have a private pay agency only, they are not licensed and nor are they certified. So the next thing in terms of bringing services into your home is, how do you pay for those? So we're talking specifically about non-skilled kinds of services. So the ways that those get paid for is private pay. You can pay for them through Medicaid or home and community-based services. Sometimes there is funding for home care services through the Area Agency on Aging. And that is actually a mandated service. So there should be some non-skilled home care available. One of our very long-term experiences with this type of program is that the waiting lists tend to be very long, and the amount of time that's available sometimes tends to be very limited. So you might only get like 2 hours every other week or something like that. And then there are some community-based organizations that are funded through various kinds of foundations and philanthropy. An example of that in the Denver area, for example, is like A Little Help, or Senior Hub has a program like that as well. Hospice, if you do use that, is funded through Medicare and Medicaid. And adult day is paid for either privately or through Medicaid. So that brings us to the really next big issue, which is how do I make sure that I am doing my due diligence? How do I know that I can trust the help that is coming into my home? And this I find is always very, very challenging, because even though we can do all of our due diligence, which I will go through here in a moment, there still are opportunities for people to feel very, very vulnerable. So some of the things that you can look for in terms of home services is you can ask for references from the agency's clients. A new tool that is sometimes available to people if you use the internet is there are sometimes people will write reviews of different agencies on Yelp. And that is one way where you can at least get information from other people in the community and their experience. And some people will write very good reviews, and some people will write reviews that are maybe not so honest, but if that's the case, pay attention to those. We don't really have any kind of star ratings or anything like that at this time for the non-skilled home care. Another thing to know is how much time do you have to give or notice if you wish to either terminate the service or even before they will begin. So do they have waiting lists? Do they require that you be certified in advance? If they're charging Medicaid, do they have to have a prior authorization? So all of those kinds of things are important. Another thing to look at is does the agency carry any liability insurance? If so, it's perfectly fine to ask for a copy of those liability insurance policies. Again, you want to make sure that if, for example, a caregiver came to your home and they were they took something of value, that there would be a way at least of getting reimbursed. Another question to ask is, are the staff bonded? And if so, is there a copy of that bond available? Some agencies do not bond their staff and some do. Again, it depends on who you're working with. Another question, because we see this time and time again, and this is where people feel really, really vulnerable, is do you have a liability policy that if some of the staff were to steal something from you, that your loss would be covered? And does the agency that you are hiring, does their policy cover any kind of theft? And in addition to theft, you might want to also look at things like negligence and any other areas of vulnerability. Another thing in Colorado that we have is we have two types of home care agencies that provide non-skilled services. We have the Class B home care agencies, and we also have home care placement agencies. On a home care agency, that staff is on the payroll of the home care agency. On the home care placement agency, the staff are actually on, you pay them directly, and then you pay some type of a referral fee or an ongoing service fee to the registry or to the home care placement agency. And they then make sure that they have someone working in your home. So again, just knowing who's responsible for such things as Social Security and Medicare, what kind of workman's comp, what kind of unemployment, who's paying, all of those kinds of things. Both the home care agencies as well as the home care placement agencies have to give you a disclosure form that basically tells you whether you are responsible for the employment of this individual and all of the Social Security and other taxes, or whether that is the responsibility of the home care agency. And according to the licensure requirements for the skilled home care agent or the non-skilled home care agencies, there is a patient's bill of rights in the statute, and you can ask for a copy of that. Some comparison questions for the hospice is to look at what kind of notice is required in terms of any kind of schedule changes. So if you are needing more or less services, what kind of notice do you have to give? You can ask for references. You should ask and know when services can begin. Again, you want to ask some of the liability questions, similar to home care agencies, as well as bonding and theft. Some of the due diligence questions around hiring a caregiver to come into your home is, again, if you are expecting them to run any kind of errands, are they going to be using your vehicle or their vehicle? And if they are using either vehicle, you will want to make sure you have the appropriate insurance and that the driver's license is current. You also might want to check the driving record if they're going to be taking you on errands. Another thing to ask the agency about is whether or not a CBI and or a fingerprint check for the criminal background check has been done, and whether or not you can see a copy of it. There is also a new check that home care agencies are required to perform. This is called a CAPS check, or a Colorado Adult Protective Services check. And what this basically looks for is, has there been any allegations by the filed against the individual that have been investigated by the County Department of Human Services for anything like elder abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation. Another type of safeguard that you may want to do is to look at references from prior employers and to contact those. And again, it's important if you're talking to employers, if you are able to get this information, is how did the individual interact with the person that you are talking to? What was their behavior? What was their demeanor? Were they there on time? Were they happy? Were they grumpy? Were they easy to work with? Were they able to take supervision and oversight? Did they really meet their needs? Sometimes you can get that information from prior employers. And if you can't, those are certainly questions that you want to ask of the agency that is placing them with you. So in Colorado, the licensed facilities, all licensed facilities are surveyed by the Colorado Department of Public Health. All individuals who have to be licensed are licensed through the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. So like nurses, therapists, doctors, CNAs, beauticians, plumbers, all of those people who carry an individual license, again, are licensed by the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. The agency, if they are required to be licensed, is licensed through the Colorado Department of Public Health. You can get a copy of those surveys if they are required to be licensed. You can get a copy of that at healthfacilities.info. And then you can use their tool, if you will, to to check on their surveys, to check on their complaints, to check on any occurrences that may have been filed. It's important to know that some facilities are not licensed, such as independent living facilities and low-income senior housing are not licensed. Everything else is licensed as a facility by the health department. For facilities facilities that are licensed by Medicare, that is Class A home care. We'll talk about that next month. And and hospices are licensed by Medicare, and nursing homes are also licensed by Medicare, just for your information. This is a link to the Denver District Attorney and their consumer outreach, but most of the district attorneys are mandated to provide some type of support for consumer protection. And so if you suspect any type of abuse or neglect, or if you are having issues with those kinds of things, you can report that to the local police department for investigation. The district attorney's offices are often engaged in providing lots of information, if you will, about fraud and scams, different things that older adults may want to be aware of. If you don't live in the city and county of Denver and you want the information for your particular area, if you need help finding that, please let us know. Our next session then is going to be on Medicare benefits to stay in your own home. It will be on October 21st at 1 p.m. You can register on Zoom again, or if you are unable to join us by Zoom and you would like to join through call-in, this is the meeting information, the telephone number. So that is what I have to share with you today in closing. Hopefully you have found this information helpful. And if you have any questions or wish to know more, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then we can spend a few minutes answering questions.